They told the caterer to remove me from my own ballroom. Name's Nora, 41, hotel owner. The peach glaze on the champagne cart hadn't even set before my sister called me a homeless woman. Funny what you become when you stop making noise. Ever been erased with a smile? The pink velvet chairs were already wheeled in when I walked into the lobby. At first I didn't recognize them. They weren't part of our regular catalog, and Daniela would have asked me before approving anything too flashy. But there they were, lined like debutantes across the parquet floor, sunlight catching on the flecks of gold trim. "New furniture?" I asked, setting my keys in the tray behind the front desk. Daniela looked up from the monitor and tilted her head. "Morning. No, it's for the Ellison Event LLC. They booked the ballroom for this weekend." I paused, hand still resting on the tray. "Ellison Event?" I echoed. She turned the screen toward me. There it was in neat Helvetica. Client, Ellison Event LLC. Venue, the Magnolia Ballroom. Event date, April 23, 2022. Invoice, $100,000. Paid. I felt the name before I processed it. Not the LC part, the Ellison part. My family didn't usually bother being subtle. I didn't say anything as I walked past the registration desk toward the double glass doors. The air in Savannah that morning was thick with wisteria and just shy of summer's burn. I could hear distant laughter through the etched glass, the kind that came from Kelsey when she knew she had an audience. The doors opened easily. Too easily. Someone had forgotten to reset the hydraulic pressure after the deliveries. Inside, the space looked nothing like the room I'd renovated last spring. The subtle off-white molding had been covered in blush drapery. The mahogany bar had been pushed back and dressed in pink florals and glassware shaped like diamonds. A champagne cart sparkled under the morning light, chilled bottles already sweating in their flutes. Kelsey stood at the center, ring light already set up, her back to me as she posed in a white jumpsuit, tag still visible at the hem. "Oh, Nora," she chirped without turning. "Glad you made it. We're making you look good, promise." The event planner beside her smiled, like she was meeting a client's assistant. I nodded politely and stepped back. This wasn't the first time Kelsey had hosted herself into someone else's spotlight. At Thanksgiving, she'd recited a toast right after our father's, clinking her glass before he'd even sat down. At my graduation, she'd handed out flyers for her new lifestyle brand. When Dad retired, she arranged a balloon arch that said "Fresh Start" and positioned herself in every photo, even when the focus was supposed to be him. But I hadn't expected her to rent my name. At noon, they sat me at the edge of a 12-person table outside the veranda. The table had been set with rose-patterned china and gold-accented flatware I didn't recognize, probably imported for the photo ops. The weather was perfect, not too humid, but warm enough to justify the cold-pressed juices lining the table. Elaine leaned over from her seat next to Kelsey. "You should wear something lighter tomorrow, Nora. Dark colors make you look tired." I didn't respond. There was no tomorrow for me in this event. The catering manager, who used to work for us before Kelsey poached her, passed by with trays of bite-sized crab cakes and gluten-free macaroons. I declined both, excused myself to the office, and shut the door. Daniela had forwarded me something an hour earlier, a contract that she thought looked odd. At first glance, it seemed standard. Line items for audio equipment, staffing, valet services, but the signature field was blank, and at the bottom, just above the page number, was a legal footer. Venue fallback financial responsibility, Nora M. Ellison. Not Kelsey, not Ellison Event LLC, me. I stared at it longer than I meant to. My name looked small on the screen, but in a way I hadn't felt in years. It carried weight. I hadn't been invited, consulted, or even asked. But I was listed. I was the bedrock beneath the stage she built for herself, and no one bothered to ask if I'd mind holding it up again. In the corner of the PDF, the invoice total blinked in muted gray. $100,000. No one had called to warn me. No one thought I might say no. Maybe they'd assumed I'd be flattered, that I'd melt under the warmth of inclusion, even if it was as an unpaid, unacknowledged contributor. But I wasn't melting. I was remembering. How the floral arrangements hadn't matched our usual supplier. How Daniela had been excluded from the pre-event meeting. How I'd been greeted like a sponsor, not a sister. I wasn't a guest. I wasn't even staff. I was just the foundation they were building on, without asking if I'd hold. The ice sculpture arrived at noon. It was meant to be a swan, I think. But from a distance, it looked more like a dollar sign mid-transformation, halfway between elegance and excess. The delivery guy grunted under its weight and wheeled it past the magnolia planters as if it were just another crate of bottled water. I stood by the front desk and watched the frost melt into a halo around its base, pooling quietly on the marble. I hadn't ordered it. I hadn't approved it. But somehow it was here. Kelsey used to tell me that perception was everything. Perception is currency, she'd say, usually with a mimosa in one hand and someone else's camera phone in the other. At the time, I thought she meant hers. That she was teaching herself how to command a room, how to hold a gaze without blinking. I didn't realize she was learning how to spend mine. Guests began to arrive around 12:30, all air kisses, heel clicks, and curated tones. I'd seen enough sponsored brunches to recognize the rhythm. Laugh, clink, pivot, post. My hotel lobby, built on antique banisters and 6 years of deferred maintenance, was now the backdrop for someone else's lifestyle content. The scent of hairspray mixed with fruit glaze from the catering trays. It felt like sugar on old wood. "Do you own this place too?" one woman asked Kelsey as they passed the registration desk. She wore oversized sunglasses despite the indoor lighting and sipped from a flute already half empty. Kelsey smiled. "Let's just say, it's all in the family." She didn't correct them. Elaine stood nearby, adjusting her bracelet with the exaggerated grace of someone who expected to be observed. "I told her," she said, nodding toward Kelsey. "I said, if you're going to celebrate turning 33, make it memorable. And she did. She always does." Then she turned to me, voice softer. "You've done well for yourself too, Nora. I just always thought you'd aim a bit higher." "Higher than what? Higher than rebuilding a rotting colonial house with my own savings? Higher than handling payroll in months when bookings barely covered utilities?" I didn't reply. The words would have landed wrong anyway, caught between the Bellinis and the centerpiece of spray-dyed peonies. Instead, I excused myself and helped one of the vendors carry in a case of crystal glassware. He was running behind, and the planner was tapping her watch like an old habit. The glasses rattled against each other with every step on the staircase. I caught the tail end of a whisper as we passed a pair of guests. "Is she staff?" "I think so. She's not in the group shots." Back in my office, I sat at the desk I'd stripped and restained by hand 3 winters ago, and opened my laptop, secondhand, missing the L key cap. The screen took a moment longer than usual to warm up. I opened a new folder. Ellison Events Evidence. Inside it, I began dropping files, screenshots of planner emails, forwarded invoices, the contract that still listed me as financial fallback, a scanned delivery order from the cake company addressed to event host Kelsey Ellison with my hotel's name pre-printed at the top. No PO, no confirmation, just assumed access. I wasn't planning anything, not yet. But I needed to know what was mine and what was being worn like borrowed silk. Daniela knocked and slipped in. She didn't sit, just leaned lightly against the doorframe. "So," she said, drawing the word out like a question, "are we pressing charges?" I glanced up. Not yet, just watching the footage. She nodded. Smart. I smiled faintly. Daniela had worked with me long enough to know when I was simmering, and when I was calculating. The afternoon passed in curated chaos. Guests paraded in and out of the parlor like it was a rotating exhibit. Kelsey posed by the swan, by the champagne cart, by the makeshift gift wall someone had rigged out of wire and silk. Every frame looked glossy, intentional, like the place had been hers for years, instead of rented in name and leveraged in silence. At 4:15, her story went up. I watched it with the sound off. She stood at the entrance of the ballroom, dress clinging just right, makeup matte and unshaken by the heat. Making magic where it counts, the caption read in pale peach font. Location courtesy of Connections. The camera panned wide, catching the chandeliers I'd spent months sourcing, the wallpaper I'd strip-tested myself to find the original layer. It caught the staircase that used to creak before I reinforced it with oak boards and faith. It caught everything, except me. No tag, no credit, not the hotel, not my name. Just a swan emoji. That was all I got. The ballroom lighting was warm, almost forgiving. It cast everything in gold. The tables, the soft folds of velvet, even the faces of guests I'd never met. There was a quiet swell from the string quartet in the corner, and from somewhere near the bar, the unmistakable fizz of Prosecco being poured too quickly. I stepped in through the side door. Neutral gray suit, flats instead of heels. No name tag, no clipboard. Nothing that would mark me as owner. Nothing that would threaten to change the script they had already decided on. It was easier that way. Easier to blend into the fabric of my own building than tear through the seams. The room was already full. Sponsor representatives shaking hands with influencers, small talk packaged into sound bites, and photographers capturing curated laughter at just the right ISO. My feet knew the groove in the wood floor by the entrance. I'd filled that dip myself with resin 2 years ago. No one else would notice it. They weren't supposed to. A caterer brushed past me, arms full of canapé trays, and nodded in quiet panic. Table 7's missing flatware, she whispered. I moved without thinking. Past the floral arch, through the curtain separating the kitchen staging area. A box of silver forks, wrong style, sat forgotten beside the drinks cart. I grabbed 2 sets and returned, careful to avoid the photographer's lens. Then I caught the seating chart. A misplaced name, Mr. Harland, VP of some vegan supplement line, was listed twice, while Ms. Amy Dupree, a Georgia-based fitness personality with 500,000 followers, had no place card. That would have caused more tension than necessary. I shifted the nameplates by hand, smoothing the table runner as I backed away. I didn't hear Kelsey approach. I felt her presence first, sharp, accelerated, like the sudden drop in temperature when a storm moves in without warning. She was in full gloss, champagne-toned gown, layers of gold jewelry, and a perfume that smelled like confidence soaked in citrus. "What?" she said loudly. "Is she doing here?" Silence prickled in the air. A few guests turned. I straightened, hand still slightly curled from the name card. Then, louder. "Who let the help wander in like that?" The crowd tensed. She smiled, teeth too perfect. "Seriously, can someone kick this homeless woman out?" No one laughed. But no one stepped in either. For a half-second, the moment hung weightless, like it could still dissolve if someone coughed, or if a glass broke at the right time. But nothing did. I met her eyes. She looked back with a certainty that only came from practice, from knowing no one had ever told her no in public and meant it. I didn't speak, didn't raise my voice, didn't defend myself. I turned. and walked. The corridor outside the ballroom felt colder than it should have. I could still hear the quartet playing something expensive. I passed the parlor, now cleared for photo booths and brand tags, and the hallway lined with paintings I'd restored by hand. Past the staircase I'd reinforced. Through the door I'd re-stained myself. Back in my office, I exhaled. My palms were open, not clenched, not shaking, just still. The monitor was already on. I pulled up the security footage, angles from the ballroom, the parlor, the hallway. The software hummed with timestamps. Rewind, rewind, stop. There. Kelsey, standing in frame, voice sharp, tone polished to gleam like glass. Me, motionless, holding flatware. And just beyond her shoulder, to the left, Daniela, still as a statue. But her phone was lifted, camera lens pointed up. I clicked again, switched to hallway feed, rewind, then paused on the frame. Daniela's hand, phone upright, the camera app open, full screen, audio bar moving. She hadn't asked. She hadn't warned me. She'd just known I wouldn't defend myself. Not aloud, not that way. But she had. And it was clear, crystal clear. My sister's voice, her face, the words, the faces of the guests, the stillness of the room, the absence of anyone stepping forward. I didn't move, didn't smile. I saved the footage to a new folder. Folder, name. Witness Angle 1. The golden hum of the ballroom continued behind the walls. They didn't know yet, but I did. The subject line read, "Let's all take a breath." The body of the message, sent at 6:41 a.m., began like this. "Nora, darling, I'm sure there's more to this than what people are saying. Don't escalate things unnecessarily. It's still Kelsey's birthday week." "No, are you okay?" "No, I saw what happened. Just the quiet implication that my silence would be more valuable than my experience." I closed the message, hovered over the reply button, wrote a sentence. "Thank you for reaching out," then added, "It was a difficult night." Then deleted both. I didn't send anything. Instead, I opened the admin tab for the hotel booking system. The ballroom was already cleared, the rentals picked up, the last vendor payments logged. But under additional charges, a few red flags blinked back at me. $1,720 for extra valet services, $980 in unscheduled champagne deliveries, and $3,100 for a lighting crew marked under Ellison Event, family rate. No rate like that existed. I began documenting, one invoice at a time. My office still smelled faintly of lilac cleaner and lemon oil. The spring rain hadn't hit yet, but the light was diffused, gray through the tall windows. On my laptop, Coltrane was playing something slow, mellow, the kind of saxophone tone that didn't push emotion, just let it settle in the chest like fog. A soft knock. Then the click of the door easing open. Daniela didn't say anything. She placed a fresh coffee beside my screen, then disappeared before I could thank her. We didn't need words. Not that morning. She'd seen it too, all of it, the footage, the tension. My mother's silence in the face of it all. The way even the staff had started checking my face more than the clock. I sipped the coffee. Too hot. Set it down. Clicked into the website CMS, opened the hotel policy section. Typed slowly. New clause. Effective immediately, the Savannah House enforces a zero-tolerance policy for abuse, verbal, physical, or reputational, towards staff or property. All events require verified legal contracts and identification from primary signatories. Family status does not equate to exemption. Save. Publish. Then I sat back, watched the cursor blink, watched the new text display under a banner that read, "Updated April 2022. In the hallway outside, I heard someone vacuuming. The kind of quiet, clean-up hum that always followed a loud night. Back to the screen. Inbox. One new message. This one wasn't from family. The sender's name was Riley Timmons, local writer. I remembered her from a tourism feature on Savannah's boutique hotels. Her work leaned more poetic than journalistic, but lately she'd been more active online. Subject: quick chat? Off the record. Body: Hi Nora, I'm writing something that won't include names unless you choose to go on record, but I'm trying to understand what happened last night at the Savannah house. There's a post making rounds titled, "She threw her sister out of her own ballroom," and people are speculating about who the quiet owner really is. I can keep this off the radar, or I can give you the space to say something, even if it's just to say nothing. Let me know. I read it twice, then a third time. I opened a new reply, typed, "Thank you for your professionalism. I'm not looking to make a statement at this time." Paused, then added, "Just one thing. Please make sure you have the spelling of my name correct. Nora. Ellison. 2 L's. That's all." I hit send, then leaned back, folding my hands over my lap. The weather hadn't broken yet. The storm hadn't come. But the wind was shifting. And this time, I wasn't going to board up the windows just because someone else didn't want to see the rain. They tried to rewrite the story. A planner's mistake, miscommunication, poor timing. I was fragile. I misinterpreted. They didn't mean it that way, but that's the thing about receipts. They don't require empathy. They just sit there, dated, numbered, unbothered. By the time mid-May rolled around, my inbox looked different. Less floral, more quiet. The cafe in the lobby had returned to its regular rhythm. 3 guests by 8:30, 5 more by 10. The espresso machine sputtered with mild determination. The new seasonal muffins, peach lavender, weren't selling great, but they made the room smell like optimism. I sat at my usual corner table, the one with the slightly slanted chair leg I still hadn't replaced, scrolling through my phone when the first ping landed. A blog post, titled in bold, "The Birthday Party from Hell, Behind the Glamour." It wasn't one of the bigger sites, but it had teeth. Someone had stitched together screenshots, event footage, even social media comments, anonymized but unmistakable. The photo they used for the header? A blurry shot of Kelsey mid-sentence, jaw tense, pointing at something, or someone. In the comments, "I knew that space looked familiar. That's Nora Ellison's place, right?" The owner stayed silent. Respect, nothing louder than dignity. I didn't reply, didn't need to. I finished my coffee and walked toward the front desk, where Daniela had just returned from the back office with a manila envelope. "Mail," she said, handing it to me like it contained something live. Inside, a check. Issued by Palm Collective, one of Kelsey's event sponsors. The memo line read, "Event contribution reversal. Apology enclosed." It was addressed not to Kelsey, not even to Ellison Event LLC. It had my hotel's full name, typed cleanly, the Savannah House. "I didn't reach out to them," I said, turning the check over. "I know," Daniela replied. "They reached you." Later that afternoon, she walked into my office, holding a printed still from the security footage. It wasn't just Kelsey in the frame. It was the moment right after. The stunned caterer, the planner frozen, eyes wide. And behind them, my staff, 2 servers, 1 bellhop, 1 intern, all paused mid-step like they'd walked into a wall of cold air. Not angry, not scared, just small. "I thought we should keep this," Daniela said. "For what?" I asked. "For them," she replied, "in case anyone ever says it didn't happen." I slipped it into a file folder labeled Staff Safety Archive. It wasn't just about me anymore. That evening, just before closing, I checked the guest mail drop. There was a cream-colored envelope, hand-addressed in a round, deliberate script. Nora Ellison, CO, The Savannah House, Savannah, Georgia no return address. Inside was a single folded sheet. Heavy paper. Light lavender ink. Dear Nora, you won't remember me, but 2 years ago, when Hurricane Elsa hit, I had nowhere to go. Every hotel was full. Yours wasn't. Not for me. You gave me the last room, even when my card didn't go through. I saw the article. I recognized the wallpaper behind your desk. I recognized you. You were never invisible. You saved me. Mrs. Daly. I read it once, then again, slower. I pressed the letter flat against my desk and ran my fingers across the signature. A little shaky. Maybe from age, maybe emotion, maybe both. There was a photo tucked in the back of the envelope. Mrs. Daly, standing beside her granddaughter at a graduation ceremony last month. Bright gowns, bigger smiles. I placed it beside the refund check. And then, for the first time since the party, I let myself smile. Not a triumphant one. Not the kind that says, I won. Just a quiet acknowledgement that sometimes being seen doesn't require spectacle. Maybe I didn't need to be loud. Maybe I just needed to stand where I was long enough for the fog to lift and the right people to look. I didn't storm out. I didn't slam doors. I stayed exactly where I'd always been, just not waiting for permission anymore. The Savannah air had shifted. Early summer now, the kind that draped itself around your shoulders like warm silk. Outside, the sidewalks glistened faintly from an afternoon drizzle that never turned into rain. And inside my hotel, the quiet was whole. The ballroom was empty again. Velvet drapes had been laundered, the scuffs on the floors buffed out, and the scent of champagne and self-importance had finally faded. It smelled like lemon polish and the faint trace of magnolia drifting in through the open windows. A young couple had just checked in. He was tall, soft-spoken. She had a scar above her eyebrow and a laugh that made the desk bell chime in sympathy. Daniela handled the paperwork while I brought out the champagne. The modest kind, the kind that didn't pretend to be anything but honest. As I handed over their room key, the woman paused and said, "We chose this place because people online said the owner really gets what peace feels like." I smiled. We try our best. She didn't know me, not the way the internet almost had, and I liked it that way. Daniela was rehanging framed art in the lobby. We decided to rotate in some older photos. One caught her eye. Me, 12 years younger, in jeans and a paint-streaked hoodie, holding a hammer with both hands and no clue what I was doing. She grinned. "You look like someone who just found a wall they wanted to knock down." I laughed. "I probably was." She framed it and placed it right at the front desk. Below the image, a small plaque, Savannah House, built, owned, and operated by Nora Ellison. No hashtags, no logo, just the truth. Later that evening, Daniela dropped off the mail, 3 flyers, a wholesale linen catalog, and 1 letter. The envelope was ivory, the handwriting tight and slanted. Elaine. I didn't open it, didn't need to. Apologies are strange things. They ask you to reopen what you spent so long cleaning up. This one, I knew, would be vague. Regretful in tone, conditional in phrasing. I'd lived that chapter. I didn't need to reread it. I placed the envelope in the drawer of the desk, beside a small velvet pouch containing the backup keys to Ballroom 3. The drawer clicked shut like a sigh. The lobby slowly dimmed as sunset leaned westward. Shadows stretched across the hardwood, pooling at corners like well-worn memories. I slipped off my shoes, walked down the hallway barefoot, past the portraits, past the rooms, past everything that once defined where I stood in my family, and I opened the door to the ballroom. Golden light bathed the room, warm and weightless. The windows were still open, letting in the murmur of a city preparing for night. No music played. None was needed. I stepped into the center of the floor, the very boards I once sanded by hand, the spot where I'd once dragged my sleeping bag, where the wallpaper peeled and I learned to scrape and patch and paint. When Kelsey called it my monk phase, I didn't argue. Let her think silence meant surrender. But it never did. It meant building. I stood there, alone, and not at all lonely. No one was watching. No one needed to. I tilted my head back, let the ceiling fan hum its low, even song. Somewhere in the distance, a freight train passed. The floor beneath me didn't move. It hadn't in years. This space, or this stillness, it was mine, earned, not inherited, kept, not granted, named, not borrowed. I breathed in and exhaled, slow. Peace isn't something you win. It's something you stop giving away. I didn't need applause or justice with a spotlight. I just needed my space back and the quiet to hear myself again. Sometimes the people closest to us take our silence as weakness, but peace isn't the absence of noise. It's the choice to no longer hand over your worth for someone else's comfort. Family can fail you, but you don't have to fail yourself. If this story reminded you of someone, or somewhere, you had to reclaim, feel free to share your thoughts. Sometimes just saying it aloud is the beginning of home.